Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, Greenland, a country you almost never hear about, but with untold riches beneath all that ice and water. We talk economics and Arctic exploration with the Prime Minister of Greenland. Also scavenging for gold in Central America's biggest municipal dump, the toxic water which can bring riches, but also death. And how about the internet and a whole lot more on your TV? Is the smart television the next big thing? So in perhaps our most northerly story yet here on Counting the Cost, we are taking a look at Greenland this week. Fascinating place actually because of things like its location, its dependency, and most of all, its potential. Greenland's actually the most sparsely inhabited place in the world, just 57,000 people in an area more than 8 times the size of the UK, which has more than 60 million people. The economy is dependent on 2 things in Greenland: fish, or more to the point, the export of fish, and also the help of the Danish government. Remember, Greenland is an autonomous country within the Kingdom of Denmark. The question we're asking this week is, can Greenland start to break free of that dependency and exploit its considerable mineral riches? Well, first you have to see the level of that dependency because it is significant. A $592 million Danish subsidy, which provides more than 60% of government revenue. That may well decrease as Greenland starts to work its natural resources, things like oil, other minerals too. Remember, the ice is shrinking, resource prices are going up, so the once forbidding areas are looking a bit more appealing, which is a rare upside actually to global warming. Oil exploration, it's promising but not yet productive. An estimated 52 billion barrels of reserves, but Cairn Oil, for example, did recently abandon a $1 billion effort there. But still no surprise it's drawn the interest of China. And Denmark, as the mother country, is eager to accommodate. Bilateral trade rose more than 20% in 2010, and now Denmark's dangling Greenland's resources in front of China, as well as the bigger prize of access to the Arctic. In fact, Greenland's at the centre of Denmark's claim to an area of the Arctic, including the North Pole. Several claims to that area, which may hold a fifth of the world's unexplored oil and gas. And Greenland could certainly use a break. It suffers high unemployment and the world's highest suicide rate. Could an influx of investment bring change and a possible path towards independence? Well, earlier in the week, we had the pleasure of speaking to Greenland's Prime Minister, PM Kleist, who braved the -6 degrees temperature outside for a chat with Counting the Cost. Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. On our program, on any business program, we talk about a global economic crisis. I'd like to ask you, seeing as we don't ever hear much about Greenland, tell me how, if at all, the global economic crisis has affected you.
It has, of course, affected our economy, but not as grave as the rest of the world. For instance, in Europe, we are blessed by a huge grant of the Danish state, and which stabilizes the Greenland economy a lot. But in terms of the new business areas, in terms of oil and minerals, we kind of feel that the big companies are not that eager to invest a lot of monies unless they have a certainty of getting it back.
So how then do you get them more interested? The obvious thought is that there is oil discoveries, oil and gas, natural reserves, of which we don't know how much there could be under Greenland, which should be enough to interest overseas investors. How are you going to bring them in then?
Of course, we are in competition with the rest of the world in that field. And we are trying to situate ourselves in kind of an average conditions in terms of taxation and demands for environmental protection and so on. But it is a worldwide competition which we have to adapt to all the time. Certain movements, either political movements or economic fluctuations influences in the interest of the companies. But I like to stress that the big companies are still very keen in pursuing findings of gas and oil in Greenland water still.
There is an argument, and I'd like to get your view on it, an argument that the whole concept of global warming is actually advantageous to you in this search for oil and gas. the ice is so thick that if there is more global warming, it actually would make it easier to get down and have a look at those deposits. What is your reaction to that sort of talk?
I'm quite aware of that argument, but still, I think the Greenland people, as all the rest of the peoples on this globe, are pursuing their interest, their aspirations for economic growth and standing on our own feet economically and politically. The reason why there is this strong focus on Greenland and the Arctic area in general is that now it's, so to speak, it has become our turn. The world is also aware of the environmental consequences of that kind of activity. But still, I think either Greenland wants to pursue this area of business or not. That would not change a lot of the climate or the environment.
You've used the phrase standing on your own feet a couple of times in this interview already, so let me ask you about the relationship between Greenland and Denmark. You're obviously hugely dependent on Denmark. Now, if you want to go a little bit more independent, how do those two things work together?
We have very limited space to pursue other areas of economy, and it seems today that the fisheries and the traditional businesses are declining, that the mineral area and the search for oil is what is left to pursue right now, and Greenland is in a situation where we are forced to pursue other areas. In terms of our relationships with Denmark, to put it in short, we have excellent relations to Denmark, and also, of course, on the reason that we are heavily economically dependent on the block grant. But still, I think that the Danish government and the Greenland government pursue the same goals in terms of pursuing other areas of economic activity.
And what about your relationship with China as well? The reason I bring it up is because only last week on this program we were discussing China and Europe and the sort of standoffishness there can be with bringing in Chinese involvement. There's plenty of talk about Chinese involvement in this Arctic exploratory work.
We have, of course, noticed that China is moving around the globe, including the Arctic area and specifically Greenland. There is a growing interest from the Chinese to get involved with the Arctic policies, and also I think that China wants to have a foot in terms of minerals and oil. We haven't yet seen concrete approaches in that field yet, but I know that the Chinese government is interested in a dialogue, and of course at this stage we are not in a situation to prevent anyone from showing their interest in Greenland.
Prime Minister, just a final thought from you as a world leader, no matter how isolated you may be, on the state of the global economy these days, on the state of the Eurozone, all these issues. How optimistic or indeed pessimistic are you about the coming year?
We are, of course, following the development very closely, and we are, of course, also affected by European economy. Europe being one of our largest markets for fish products. And still, I would claim that the consequences of the Euro crisis and the general situation in Europe have limited consequences for Greenland, luckily enough.
Prime Minister Kleist, Prime Minister of Greenland, thank you so much for your time and for staying out in the cold for us. Thank you. And still ahead on Counting the Cost, we're in South Africa, where the President is promising his people he will create new jobs. We'll find out if they believe him or not a little bit later on. Right now, though, we're going to look at the issue of water scarcity and a kind of conundrum which faces us here in the Gulf. Believe it or not, it's actually quite easy to forget you live in the desert because water is plentiful. There are, beautiful green parks and golf courses, things like that. But that abundance comes at a cost, one that may be unsustainable in the long run. Because the Gulf doesn't treat water like a scarce resource, subsidies hide the real cost, and it's led to some of the highest consumption rates in the world. Saudi Arabia, for example, consumes 91% more water than the global average. And across the GCC, the yearly consumption per person is 850 cubic metres compared with the world average of 500. Agriculture is another culprit. It accounts for 80% of water use in rural areas, despite producing only a tiny portion of the food consumed. And seawater desalination, well, it provides 2/3 of drinking water, which is expensive and accounts for up to 25% of energy use in the GCC. Well, we're going to talk more about this with Dr. Walid Fayad. He's with the international management consultancy Booz & Company. Dr. Fayad joining us from Beirut this week. Thank you for your time. So many issues here, but the one which really intrigues me is the agriculture one. So much water going towards a sector which doesn't provide huge returns. Now, you know, the self-sufficiency, it's a great idea, but are enough precautionary measures actually being taken?
Among the measures that they have taken, I mean, they have rationalized the water use in agriculture. Saudi Arabia has managed to reduce its agricultural water use by about 2.5% per year through a set of initiatives, including, for example, discontinuing exports of wheat and fodder crops, and planning to shift investment in agriculture to territories outside of Saudi Arabia where there may be more abundance in water, renewable water resources. And also they are reducing duties on agricultural imports. Now, on the domestic water side, there are also a number of initiatives that we're taking. For example, governments both in Saudi, in the UAE, and elsewhere in the GCC have launched significant water conservation campaigns, including education regarding the scarcity of water, education regarding the rational use of water, and also the deployment of water conservation kits, such as kits for water efficiency kits for showers, for toilets, and also for faucets.
And are you confident from the research you've done that enough is actually being done by these governments, and you know, particularly on the infrastructure side of things, because you've just mentioned the education and the conservation issues, which are both very important. But what about governments actually getting in there, getting the concrete infrastructure in place to make sure everyone is looked after in the future?
Right. Yes. As a matter of fact, the governments are investing a lot in water. After a period, in order to cope with economic growth, and also exorbitant economic growth, and also population growth, they have been investing at rates of about, for example, in Saudi Arabia, at a rate of $6 billion per year. And this represents about 1.4% of the GDP, or about $200 per capita per year. And compare that, for example, with a country like the US. The US spends about $100, or needs to spend about $100 per capita per year on water infrastructure, and that's only 0.2% of GDP. So they are spending a lot of money. The problem is the cost is high because it's going towards technologies that are expensive, desalination technology, but also the infrastructure cost of transmitting the water from the seashore all the way to points of use and where the demand is. So the issue is not an issue of investment, it's an issue of rationalizing the consumption and aligning it with the economic and environmental objectives.
That is Dr. Walid Fayad talking water scarcity with us here on Counting the Cost. Thank you for your time. Now, parts of the global economy are clearly still struggling, but metals are, broadly speaking, not. Gold, for example, peaked at just under $2,000 an ounce back in September, and even though it's off that high now, it's still high enough to keep people scavenging for precious metals. And in some dangerous conditions too. Have a look at this report from David Mercer now in Guatemala.
With magnet and knife in hand, Julio Garcia sifts through sand and dirt, searching for treasure. Already today, he's found pieces of silver and gold.
So how much is this worth?
Around 40 quetzales.
That's $5 US, but on a good day, Julio might earn 30, 4 times Guatemala's minimum wage. But there's another important reason this 50-year-old chooses to make his living in a garbage-strewn ravine.
I decided to work here because I can work on my terms. If I want to, I leave at noon or whatever time I choose. Working for a company, on the other hand, you might have to start at 6 in the morning. And when I worked security, I worked all day and night.
The mine, as it's called, lies a few hundred meters below Guatemala City's municipal dump, the largest in Central America. Scavengers search for bits of metal that get knocked loose from the trash and end up on the bottom of a sewage ditch that runs through the ravine. But the same toxic surge of water that brings riches can also result in disaster.
During the rainy season, flash floods are common here and can be deadly. In 2008, dozens of people were killed when a mountain of garbage collapsed on top of them.
Antonio Yupe is one of those who survived. His scars a reminder of the dangers they face.
I was buried beneath a thick layer of earth. It carried me all the way down there. I was buried really bad. God, I said, if you really exist, help me. I don't want to die, I said. I want to see my children. I want to see my oldest son.
But despite almost losing his life, Antonio comes back here nearly every day. Working on the streets of Guatemala City, they say, is far more dangerous. In a country with few opportunities for the poor, this trade, however dangerous, is hard to give up.
And from South America to South Africa, where millions of people are out of work and their president's now promising to create new jobs. Jacob Zuma this week announced a big new infrastructure program. Problem is, for out-of-work South Africans, these sorts of promises of new jobs are nothing new. Hada Mutasa picks up the story now in Johannesburg.
Esther Mahlole and Anna Gubane sell chicken to earn a living, but business is slow. That's because people just don't have jobs. South Africa has more than 4 million unemployed people. And these are some of them. Many haven't worked in more than 5 years. They don't believe President Jacob Zuma will deliver on his promises and create more jobs for the poor. So they want to start their own community farm.
They don't trust him anyway, he just talks so that people can listen to him. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we don't get the jobs. We don't get the jobs, so it's frustrating.
If things go well, this is where the farm will be.
The group wants to grow vegetables like carrots, onions and spinach, which they'll then sell to the local community and raise money to feed their families. The problem is they can't afford to buy this piece of land.
It doesn't help that finding startup capital to go into business isn't easy. In his fourth State of the Nation address, the country's president, Jacob Zuma, said a few jobs have been created.
Fourth quarter figures released on Tuesday indicate that the rate of unemployment has come down from 25% to 23.9% as a result of new jobs.
But unemployment levels are still high. He also promised to provide quality healthcare, education and basic services like water and electricity to the poor. Still, the country's president, Jacob Zuma, says tackling high unemployment is a priority, and so is providing quality healthcare, education and basic services like water and electricity to the poor. This is an important year for Zuma. He's running for re-election as leader of his party, the African National Congress.
The president is not just a sort of detached president for the sake of the masses. He's also a career politician. It's a job, and he wants to stay in the job. And he has calculated that keeping your enemies closer than your friends is an important tactic for making sure that you get a second term.
That also means managing poor people's expectations. They're important to Zuma because they form the majority of voters. But he also doesn't want to upset the big businesses and powerful labor unions that say they help put him in power.
Now, regular viewers of this show will know we love gadgets and the crowded marketplace in which they exist. Well, get ready for the next one. Smart TVs, doing everything your smartphone or your tablet computer does, but on a much bigger scale. Have a look at this. So we've been through the whole smartphone revolution and then tablet computers, which have become in vogue for the last couple of years. What about bringing it all back to the living room? The idea that you could do everything you do on your computer, your smartphone or your tablet computer, but do it on the television. This is what we're going to look at, the idea that 2012 is the year of the smart TV. This one, it's made by Samsung, though other companies, of course, are getting into this as well. And I tell you, anyone who has walked into our newsroom and seen this screen in the last week or so. Has been very impressed with that. I mean, the picture's quite nice. There's Adrian Finnegan reading the news. But when you get into the Smart Hub, you're dealing with all sorts of things like YouTube, Picasa, Twitter, Facebook, Skype. You can do a direct Skype call off the screen. And we're going to talk to an independent analyst about all this to get his take on, as we said, whether 2012 is going to be the year we all start talking about smartphones, smart TVs, I should say. And if everything is cooperating, there he is, Jonathan Gore, who's joined us from IDC, Research Manager there. See, I knew the technology would work eventually, Jonathan. Thank you for your time. What is your overall take on smart TVs? As I say, my view is that it's all about mobile, isn't it? You should be able to take everything wherever you go. Do you really want to sit in front of your TV screen and do your internet browsing and your YouTube viewing?
Well, it's not just about mobile. It's about mobile coming home. It's about your fixed and your mobile devices talking to each other, and the applications that you use on your mobile devices being similar or the same as and working with the devices and the content that you have at home and the services that you would use at home. It's really about bringing all these worlds together, your home world and your work world.
And are you convinced by that idea? I mean, would you buy one of these things? They're beautiful looking TVs, I've got to say that. They're lovely looking things. Would you want one of these in your home? And do you think you would actively want to spend time in front of it doing all these things when you could be somewhere else using a tablet computer or something like that?
You'll be doing both. I mean, as it is, people who have a broadband connection, half the time that they're watching TV, they're also on their laptop. As it is, we already multitask in front of our television. So it's only a half step away from multitasking with your television.
Brand-wise, who do you think's on their game now? We've got a Samsung here, which we've looked at, but I know Sony's gone into this as well, and you just know that Apple will be doing something along these lines at some point as well. Who's in the game at the moment?
Sure, I think obviously you mentioned Samsung and Apple, but of course Sony, LG, Toshiba, all the big consumer electronics guys. But there are the people that sell you the device that have the Samsung, the Sony, the LG, but there are also the people that provide the software. Google with Android, Microsoft, of course, with Windows, and Apple, of course, with the iOS platform. Those are also players in the game that perhaps don't actually build devices.
Do you see this sort of thing taking off, Jonathan?
I see it being incrementally taking off. I think that you mentioned some of the services that you would access over a TV, like Netflix or Pandora, and in some ways those are just like changing the channel on your television. It's just another channel. And initially anyway, that's what most people will use these devices for, just using it to get access to another stream of content. But later on, yes, eventually we will get to a point where people are using it to help them plan their day, help them understand work better, do things at home better, entertain themselves more efficiently. I think, yes, this is the way that we're going, where we have more devices that are connected, and talking to each other, and talking to accessing services both at home and over the internet.
I wonder if I can ask you, and this is almost a bit of a social commentary, but I wonder what you think when you do your research into all of these devices and the way you've been describing the way that they interconnect. That's great, but are we going to be having, particularly young people these days, glued to their TVs, their phones, their tablet computers, and it's always going to change the whole social dynamic of things?
I don't know about your household, but my children already are glued to their tablets.
No, it's exactly the same in mine. My daughter can operate my iPad, and it frightens me.
I don't think so. I think that the power. I think that all these things help to enhance connections that we already have, and help us make new connections. I don't think that they replace the connections.
All right, that is Jonathan Gore joining us from IDC here on Counting the Cost, talking smart TVs. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Yep, and that is where we're going to leave you for this week. But if you want to get in touch, here's how you do it. You can send a tweet to either me at Kamal AJE or our business editors there as well at Abid Oliver Ali. If you're not on Twitter, email's just fine. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our address. And then you can jump over to aljazeera.com/business. If you hit the CTC link at the top, it links onto our page. All our episodes are up there in full for you to catch up on whenever you want. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.